Hi guys, this is Sarah at the Sioux City Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center, and today we're going to be talking about why the Missouri River was so important to Lewis and Clark. And then the second half of the video, I will show you how to make your own little river maze with things you have at home. Now, right behind me, you see the Missouri River that runs right through Siouxland, and this was the river that Lewis and Clark traveled up. And the reason they did this was because one, they wanted to know how far the Missouri River stretched north, and two, if there was continuing rivers, if there was a long river connection all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And this river route all the way to the ocean was known as the Northwest Passage, because water in the early 1800s was the fastest way to travel, especially if you were buying and selling different goods. If you were a merchant or a shop owner and you wanted to send something far away, you had to use the river. That could carry all your heavy cargo, and it's the fastest way to get anywhere. So in the early 1800s, no airplanes, no trucks, no cars, you all travel by river. Now, the Missouri River could be pretty dangerous, and it was pretty dangerous for Lewis and Clark too. They were on this huge keelboat. If you've ever been to the center, we have a really great painting of it. It was 55 by 8 feet, and it carried 12 tons of cargo. So that's about 2 elephants could sit on the deck. And this carried all of their supplies, and it carried the men up the Missouri River. Now, while they were on the river, the captains talked about some of the problems they had in their journals. Oftentimes, the keelboat would run into snags. So these fallen trees had fallen into the river, half in mud, half sticking out of the water. The keelboat would run into it, it would do a 180 degrees, almost tip over, almost losing the supplies. Another thing the captains talked about were sawyers, and these were tree branches that were underwater that the keelboat would unexpectedly run into and get trapped in. There was also sandbars that would start sinking into the river. One night they were camping on a little island right in the river, and the sandbar, this little island, actually started to dissolve right into the river. The captains had to wake up quickly with their soldiers, jump back in the keelboat, and get to shore. So there's quite a few things that were happening while they were traveling up the river. And they actually follow the Missouri River, if you don't know, actually goes all the way up to the Rocky Mountains in Montana. That's the headwaters. That's where the Missouri River begins, and it goes all the way down to the Mississippi outside St. Louis. That's the confluence of the Mississippi and the Missouri River. And of course, while they're traveling up the river, they're writing about all the animals and vegetations they saw living along the river. Of course, the river was a water source for all of these animals, plants, and the native people. And 200 years ago, you always wanted to live by a water source. So that's just a few fun facts about the river. Stay tuned, and I'm going to show you guys how you can make your own little river maze right here, and I will see you soon. Hi guys, welcome to part 2 of River Run. Here I'm going to show you how you can make your very own river maze with supplies that you probably have lying around your kitchen table. So to show you the finished river maze I've already made, it looks like this. You'll need a little marble to be your keelboat. You have different obstacles, so I have some overhanging tree branches, I have some sandbars, I have these sawyers. Remember, those are tree branches that would be underwater that would catch the keelboat. I have some snags, so some river timber that's floating in the river, and these are all obstacles your keelboat might run into. And so I have a little start, and then you'll just roll it around your river maze and try to make it into the finish. And of course, you can use different supplies that you might have at home too. Be creative, try out different materials that you might have, and make your very own river maze. Now, just like Captain Lewis and Clark, we create a plan for our river maze to start with. They always were prepared. They kept notes in their journals about their preparations. So I drew out the circle of my river maze, my paper plates. I have a start, a finish, and then I drew an idea of where I wanted my obstacles to go. And then I soon discovered when I started to make my river maze, I had to make some changes, which is okay. Lewis and Clark, they were always adapting to different situations. So you might start off with a good plan, but you might find that you might have to make a few changes to your river maze. So after you create your plan, you grab your paper plate. I just use some tape to put start and finish. And then you can use some markers if you want to trace out where you want some of your obstacles to go. So I have a cotton ball, which are going to be my sandbars. I think I'm going to put that one there. I have some plastic straws that are going to be my snags. Those trees that would often fall into the river, start floating downstream. My pipe cleaners are going to be my sawyers. So after a cottonwood tree fell into the river, their huge branches would stick out of the water and catch unsuspecting boats. I think I put that one right there. And then I have some paper here that'll curve into like a little tunnel, and those will be my overhanging trees from the riverbank. And I think I'll put that one right there. Now, of course, today, if you're traveling up the river, you might wonder how Lewis and Clark got up the river without an engine. Because remember, there are no engines right now with Lewis and Clark. And they were able to do this because the river was a lot wider and not as deep. And of course, most of the time they were using manpower, so their soldiers in the keelboat would actually have to get out of the keelboat. They would often tow it, so they would tie a rope to the front of the keelboat and tow it, drag it by hand up the river. Another thing they did, they had these huge poles, really long poles, that they would dig into the riverbed and propel the boat upriver. And so there'd just be a line of men pushing the poles into the river, propelling the boat upriver. On a good day, they could row it and use the mast, the sail on the mast, and use the wind. But of course, they always had to be careful because if you live in Iowa, you know the wind can have a mind of its own, and if it blows a little too hard, it might make the keelboat unbalanced, might start tipping it, and so often they couldn't use that mast because the wind was a little unpredictable. But luckily today we have engines, so that makes life traveling up and down the river a little bit easier. And I'm going to add my little sandbar to finish up my maze right here. There we go. And of course, you can add as many obstacles as you want to your river maze. And you can make it really tricky, you can make it really easy, you can go through different directions, and that's all there is to it. So I will put the worksheets on the comments section below, and feel free to share pictures of your finished river maze. We would love to see them. And if you have questions, type your questions below, and have a great day. Thanks, guys.